and welcome to How to Deal When the Shit Gets Real podcast. I'm Rietta, and today I'm here with Danny Coon. So, Danny, how do you deal when the shit gets real? Or just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name is Danny Coon. I am a retired sergeant from the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles County, California. I worked 31 years, and 30 of those years was assigned to field operations or to different patrol stations. I worked as a patrol deputy, training officer, detective training officer, and then as a patrol sergeant. And it was a fun and exciting 31 years, and yeah, some things happened. Some were fun, some were not so fun, but overall, it really had a good time, and it was a good career. During that time, when I first came on, you only ever heard about stress, and they talked about stress in the academy for about half an hour, and then every once in a while you would hear about stress. But later on, after the war on the global war on terrorism started, right around 2008, 2009, you started hearing about our military warriors coming back with post-traumatic stress. And after I retired, I always thought post-traumatic stress was a big nothing, but after I retired, I found out that it's real. And that's what I do now is I talk to people about post-traumatic stress and suicide among first responders, particularly law enforcement. And it's something that I got involved in about 2018, and I write a blog about it. I've written a book about it. I'm in the process of research on another book on just straight suicide for the general public. So it's going to be an interesting time coming up. But, I learned in around 2017. Now, I'm going to back this up a little bit. In 2013, when I retired, I moved from Los Angeles down to northern San Diego County. So I live right next door to a large Marine Corps base called Camp Pendleton.
Yep.
And yeah, a lot of people know it. And so I'm in a large community of retired and active duty and separated Marines and Navy. And San Diego County, man, it's a Navy county anyway. So there's a lot of military here. And just after retirement, I started talking to some of the youngsters that they had just gotten out of the military, and I got PTSD, and I'm going, "What? You're crazy. You're weak. You don't know what you're talking about." And I kind of, after a while, over the years, I started, as I talked to these guys, I go, "This thing's real." And then in beginning of 2018, the first 4 months sucked, but the first month of 2018, my dad passed away unexpectedly. And that just brought out all kinds of feelings that I had suppressed over years. I didn't even know I was doing it. I just became an expert of whenever I see bad stuff or whenever bad things happen, you just stuff it down and don't talk about it and you move on. And a bunch of stress came out. And then about 4 months after that, my wife was diagnosed with stage 3 lung cancer. And more stuff came out, and it just got worse. And that unfortunately metastasized to her brain, and she had brain surgery. She's now walking, talking miracle of God. So
wow.
And actually, this March she will be 5 years cancer free. So
that is amazing.
That's amazing. So that's the bright side.
Well, congratulations
the dark sides
to her
that we've been going through. But what I learned in about 2017, beginning of 2018, was that more police officers were dying by suicide than in the line of duty. And I put out a YouTube video a while back, and I say, and Colonel Dave Grossman, he has said it several times, that suicide is the number one killer of cops. And it is. And to back that up is last year in 2023, there was 132 reported suicides. And these are suicides, law enforcement suicides. And these are suicides that are reported to an organization called Blue Help. And they also go by First Help because they've started tracking firefighter, dispatcher, and medic suicides. But just last year, 132. That is more than there were law enforcement line of duty deaths. Last year, line of duty deaths, it was I take that back. Yeah, there was slightly lower in line of duty deaths last year than suicide deaths. The year before, in 2021, was the only time that law enforcement line of duty deaths outweighed uh, suicide deaths, and that was because of the COVID-19.
Oh,
And but this year, fortunately, I think the message is starting to get out. People are starting to understand. Law enforcement is starting to take a more active role in watching out for each other. This year, to date, as of today, there are 99 law enforcement suicides, and unfortunately, this year there are 132 law enforcement line of duty deaths. And of those line of duty deaths, it was kind of weird. Was last year there were 48 cops shot and killed in the line of duty. This year to date there's 48 shot and killed in the line of duty. So hopefully we can get through the next 15 days without any violence on our cops, and it'll end less than last year. But that's what I've been talking about and trying to get people to the law enforcement community and the first responder community to understand it. Post-traumatic stress is real, and it is something that is harming us. Now, when I became a cop in 1981, I'd always wanted to grow up and be a law enforcement. It's probably in my DNA, probably a calling, something I started doing or wanted to do as a kid.
You read my mind, because I was going to ask you. I'm like, let's take it back. Why'd you become a cop? So you read my mind.
And thank you. And just from a kid, I always wanted to be a cop. And so when I was turned 14, the Boy Scouts at the time, now it's not part of scouting, but there are law enforcement explorer programs put on by many police departments and sheriff's departments throughout the United States. I became a law enforcement explorer. And then when I aged out at that, at age 18, it was 1975, I joined the Army and became a military police because I figured that would be the closest I could come at 18-year-old to being a cop. And it was different. You're a soldier first, and then for me, police call was picking up cigarette butts out in the grass. But
oh no,
that's a joke. But it was fun and interesting, and it just being a veteran, the benefits from that and the experience you get from the military is it's awesome. And after I got out of that, I went to college for a couple of years, got a associate's degree in law enforcement. And at the same time, I was looking for different agencies to hire onto. And I grew up in Orange County. So just north of San Diego County, Orange County. For people that don't know, just think of the original Disneyland in Anaheim or the California Angels. And so I grew up there, and that was my framing or how I thought law enforcement would be like, was because I was an explorer with an Orange Police Department, and it was nothing like when I got hired by LA. And but they were not hiring, and every time a law enforcement agency in Orange County would say they were hiring, the same 150 people would show up, and no one would get hired, and it was getting depressing.
Oh man!
So I bit the bullet and says, okay, I'm going to go to work I'm going to apply for the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, knowing that I'm going to get stuck in the county jail for a couple of years. And so I did. I made it. Went through the academy, went to jail, and I was fortunate I only went to jail for 9 months. And when I went into the jail system at 1982, Los Angeles had already been awarded the Olympics. They were building up for the Olympics, and departments like Los Angeles Police Department, the Sheriff's Department, Pasadena Police Department, a couple other departments where they had venues that the Olympics were doing, were building up their forces. So what the sheriff did was they hired a whole bunch of people, and then immediately, as soon as they had minimum time in a jail, they'd move them out to a patrol station so they'd get trained, and they would have plenty of patrol people to train so they could be working for the Olympics, which makes sense.
Yes, I was just going to say that makes sense.
So I was fortunate that I got out of jail early, and then I just started a 30-year patrol career. And I started off working in the, I'm going to call it the South Bay area of Los Angeles County, the Palos Verdes Peninsula, kind of like the Baywatch towns and stuff like that. And I went from there. I went up to East Los Angeles, which is the home of the Hispanics gang in the United States. worked in East Los Angeles for 4 years, saw a lot of things, did a lot of weird stuff, and from there I moved up to northern Los Angeles County, and that is an area called the Antelope Valley. It's the Antelope Valley. The size of it is like 2 times, 3 times the size of the city of Los Angeles. It's huge, and I worked up there for 8 years, and then I transferred to a small island. There's a Catalina Island is an island that's about 22 miles off the coast of San Pedro, the coast of Los Angeles. And they have a sheriff station there. They have a population of anywhere between 35 to 5,000 people in one city, which contracts with the city or contracts with the county for law enforcement. And I was able to transfer over there and be a detective. And that was probably where I worked the hardest in my career.
That's super cool.
It was fun, but it was stressful.
You wouldn't think things would be stressful on an island. Do you think it would be kind of nice? But
yeah, that's during the season, as I'll call it, and back now the season goes for about 8 months or 9 months. Back then, the season was going for about 7 or 8 months, basically from Memorial Day all the way through the end of October. And you'd get, like 4th of July weekend, you'd get 10,000 tourists, and so you had the visitor population coming over doing their silly stuff during the season. But then during the off season, the people that live there, they kind of go crazy and do stupid stuff. Drugs was prevalent. And what I learned from there is that in the service industry, that drug and alcohol abuse are huge. And that was obviously a problem on the island. And it was weird is because of the drug and alcohol abuse, a lot of the people that weren't working would be stealing, and they would during the season, they'd be stealing stuff from the visitors' cameras and breaking into hotel rooms and doing that kind of things, and then doing their drugs. And
no wonder you were stressed. That's craziness.
And we're catching guys. What was one? The Los Angeles Sheriff's Department has a huge narcotics detail that goes off on different things. And I think you're from the Chicago area.
I am, but I actually lived in San Clemente for 7 years.
Oh, okay. So
my husband's in the Marine Corps. So
okay, you know where I'm talking about.
I do.
Yeah, they have a like any large police department and sheriff's department, they have a huge narcotics division. And we had obviously had a narcotic problem on the island. And so I got in touch with some people I knew from the Narco Bureau. They came over, they did some stuff. And over a 3-year period, I had an investigation where I took the main supplier of cocaine off the island. And then we got that rolled up into another major supplier of methamphetamine. Wow. But it was funny when one of the narco guys came over, he looked around and he goes, you got a cartel going on here. And that's basically what he had, because the Hispanics, most of them were Mexican nationals that were working on the island, but they had a smaller sect of guys that would just go back and forth from the island to the mainland. They would hook up in South Central Los Angeles and East Los Angeles with different Hispanic gangs that were dealing dope, and then take them back over to the island. So it was kind of crazy, but it was.
I always looked at Little Catalina. I actually never made it out there, but I always looked at it as this just like cute little place to go. Boy, was I wrong.
Yeah, from the outside it is. When I was there, we had the only murder that the island had in like 40 years, and
of course.
It was a brutal murder where.
Did you solve it?
Yeah, it was solved.
Good.
The victim was a 42-year-old lady and who was married, and she was with her 22-year-old tweaker boyfriend, and they went to the island. And after a night of partying and meth and cocaine and tequila, he killed her, and it was brutal. He killed her like 3 different ways.
Oh my God!
And that's the stuff that you see, and cops see that all the time. And I could go back when I was working in East Los Angeles. There was a party. It was a wedding reception, and the husband or the groom was from one gang, and the brothers of the bride was from another gang, at the end of the night, that ended up to a big shootout, and there was like 12 or 13 bodies, not all of them dead, just like I think 3 or 4 people were killed, but 13 or 14 bodies just up and down this major thoroughfare of people
Oh
that got
my
shot.
gosh.
And those are just things you see, and it's you just bury them down. And after I left Catalina, I went over and I worked in Compton, the city of Compton, in 2000, contracted for law enforcement with the sheriff's department. So I worked there as a training officer for detectives, or a training detective. And then after 4 years in Compton, I promoted to sergeant and stayed in South LA and just worked south. Different. Well, actually, I was in a countywide unit. That's my area was in South LA, and it was different because now I'm supervising the kids, and then to me they were kids because I was 50 some odd years old, and they're just out of the jail, and they want to do things. You kind of got to teach them and control them. But it was overall, it was a lot of fun. During my time, spent 4 days at the Los Angeles riots, and that was a different time. I could mention before in the past, and I'll say it again. That was probably the most fun I ever had in my career, because we were unhandcuffed and allowed to do police work, and just gaffling up people and taking them to jail, and actually thinking you're doing some good. But I also worked like right now where Malibu is. Right now in Malibu, there's a huge fire going on. It's been going on for a week. I've worked many fires in the Malibu area, worked many fires up in the mountains above Los Angeles, and saw a lot of devastation from that.
Yeah, it's horrible. We got evacuated from the base the one year that we lived there. I could literally see the fire from our house on base
Yeah.
in Pendleton. It was crazy.
But overall, there was, when I first went to patrol, I worked a station where you had to learn just about everything. So I learned the criminal side of the job, but then I also, because they didn't hire traffic cars there, the criminal side also had to do the traffic side. So my training officer, and then for the 3 years I was at that station, I'd work a traffic / criminal car. So I was doing both jobs, and it was good that I learned that skill, because it came in later on. Is you get tired of the death and destruction and just all the nonsense calls on the criminal side. You can always go to a traffic car and go write people tickets and solve traffic accidents. And but unfortunately, traffic accidents, they get kind of ugly after a while. I had one crash where a lady had ran a stop sign. She had 3 kids in her car. Ran a stop sign and T-boned a Jeep Cherokee, and the 3 kids in her car she was killed, and the 3 kids in her car were killed.
Oh
And,
my goodness.
seeing that, or I had one where this guy, he was an idiot. He was trying to impress a girl he had met at one of the local bars, and this lady was telling him how her son, who was like 2 or 3 years old, liked tractors, and he goes, "Oh, I'm a tractor driver." So they drove out to a construction site, and he's driving this kid around on a tractor at 2:00 in the morning, drunk, and the kid falls off the tractor, and he runs him over and kills him. And
oh my God.
Those are the things you deal with, and those are what you suppress. Those are just always pushing them things down and down and down.
So do you think that is one of the main reasons that PTSD and suicidal ideation is high in police officers?
Yes, I do, because you live in part of PTS. I call it post-traumatic stress injury instead of disorder, because I don't believe it's a disorder. I think it's an injury, and injuries can be healed, disorders cannot. And I have friends that are in the healing side of it. So, and we'll discuss that in a little bit. But the going into the job, there are several different things, but you're always what I call, and there's a guy named Kevin Gilmartin. He's a retired lieutenant from Pima County Sheriff, and he's a PhD in psychology, and he coined the term the hypervigilant cycle. And what happens is, for cops, when they get ready to go to work, probably 2 or 3 hours before they get ready to go to work, or unless you're working day shift, an hour before, but you start amping up and you start getting ready for the job, and you're thinking about what you have to be doing when you get to work. So by the time you get to work, you're already amped up halfway. And then you get there and you start going to calls. And the best way to put it is you have what's called the HPA axis. It's the hypothalamus pituitary gland adrenal gland axis. And it's when things happen, when you get excited, when you get really super hyper vigilant, these things kick in and your body starts producing extra cortisol. Your body starts producing adrenaline, and you're releasing all kinds of different hormones into your body, getting ready for some type of fight or flight. And that's you get into that, and you raise yourself up in the hypervigilant scale, and then it just doesn't go away. If you do it once, like if you went outside and saw something and then it got you scared, and probably in a half hour you would be calmed down and everything like that. For cops, it doesn't last that long, or it doesn't go away that quickly, because they're always going up and down on that scale every day. Even in rural cops in rural neighborhoods, they're still going up and going down. And that's Gil Martin calls that the hypervigilant roller coaster. And what you're doing is you're going up, and when you're up on that adrenaline high, you're funny, you're happy, you're excited, you're doing things, but eventually you're going to crash and burn. And a lot of guys, they'll get off work and they'll go drinking and to maintain that high, they're going and they're talking to their friends and they're going over and over on how their day went and how the cool things that happened, and then they crash. And they go home and they're just a blob. They sit on their couch and go bleh, and don't do anything for the next several hours until they start again. And your body never catches up. I'm going to steal a term from a psychiatrist, but it's your body keeps score, and eventually it's going to drag you down. And that's basically what's causing or building up to the stress, or what we know as post-traumatic stress. Now, what post-traumatic stress basically is just you're crashing, you have low desire, high anxiety, your anger. Those are the kind of things that will just eventually cause you to crash. I wrote a book called Broken, and in the book I explain in the very beginning how our minds work. And what we have your amygdala, which is inside the middle of your brain, a real small gland. And it's been called the smoke detector gland. That's the thing that when something happens, go all kinds of things happen, and it sends a signal to your hippocampus. And your hippocampus it sends messages to your HPA axis, and that also your hippocampus it keeps short-term and long-term memories, as well as your frontal cortex up in your brain. And what happens when you get into this PTSD complex type thing? We just saw it with we see it with our military warriors, and we see it with law enforcement, firefighters, and medics. Is they go up and down so many times, their smoke alarm keeps going off. It just says, I'm tired. And then one day you're driving down the street and you smell a smell, or you see something. You see a bank where maybe you handled a bank robbery one time, or just something weird will happen, and your hippocampus will trigger your amygdala, which will then go through into your HPA system, and for no reason you're just in total stressed out, just to the point where if you're driving, you got to park your car, and you got to recover from that. A lot of people don't, and that just leads on to suicidal ideation. Now, there's in 2022, there was a group called the Rudderman Group, and they did a survey, and they did one in 2019 and 2022 on law enforcement, and they came up with there are about 35% of law enforcement officers have been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress injury. And I was listening to a podcast this morning, and there's some guys that teach on PTSI also, and they were saying Their belief is it's probably higher, but they just haven't been diagnosed. So 35% diagnosed is a pretty high. And
Yeah.
it could really be higher because, cops don't get help. And
And
that's
I agree,
an
and I
issue.
see the same thing with the military too. A lot of the military guys are not reporting it either, so I don't think the
Yeah.
numbers for the military guys are accurate either, especially the active duty ones.
Yeah. And uh, they also came out with, what was it? Cops are 5 times more likely to experience post-traumatic stress or depression than the general public. And what's interesting on that is, well, that's on the suicide portion of it. But let me see here. All kinds of stress and stuff. Where I want to go to, I'm looking at my notes real quick. Is
Take
there
your
was
time.
a as we go into suicide and suicide ideation, there's a psychologist, PhD, Olivia Johnson. She's was an Air Force veteran. She spent several years as a police officer and got her doctorate in organizational leadership. And she has become a suicidologist, or a person who studies suicide. And she has come up with several different reasons why, um, the 10 leading causes of why cops have issues with suicide ideation. And there's all kinds of things that lead up to it. We talked about the hypervigilant, the PTSD, but these are the things that it might be one thing that pushes them over the edge. And I can take this from the last couple of suicides from the sheriff's department that I know of. The number one reason is interpersonal relationship issues. They're having problems with their spouses or their better half. And you have a whole bunch of other stuff already built up inside you, and you get in a fight with your wife or your husband, or you break up with your significant other, something happens. That's one of the number one causes of suicidal ideation among cops. Another one is substance abuse and addiction. And you think of what addiction within cops, back when I was working for 1 decade, the biggest addiction was steroids before they became illegal. And that was an issue within just the general public, was the use of steroids and making people get weird and do stupid stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But among law enforcement, you have prescription medication. You hear about guys getting in car accidents or getting shot or breaking a leg or doing something, getting injured somehow. They get on medications and they get addicted to it. And that causes problems for it. Where they get to the point where they're going to lose their job or they're going to be disciplined. They don't want to get off the medications, and that'll lead to it. And then we get into alcohol. In the law enforcement community, alcohol is deeply engraved. I'm trying to think, just about every cop show, with the exception of Adam 12, there was alcohol in it. Joseph Wambaugh, who wrote all kinds of law enforcement cop novels, every one of his novels has the cops going out and drinking and doing stupid stuff and shooting out lights and stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
even the TV show Baltimore, Life on the Street, the homicide detectives they depicted on that, own the bar that they drink at.
Oh.
And you hear about the old time cops who would hide a bottle in the old call boxes before their radios, or would hide a bottle in their desk drawer. And then you go back into, the roaring 20s and hiding the alcohol, mainly because it was illegal, but they're also hiding it, to do it. And that is one of the major causes of the suicide ideation. You get the buildup of stress, just stress in general. You have, for our military warriors, guys going off to Iraq and Afghanistan, while they saw more combat than any other warrior in any other war, it could be that one thing that sets them off. It could be that day they're just going down the road, a roadside bomb hits, and they're done.
Mm-hmm.
For most part, for cops, it's the buildup of stuff, and that's what I was getting at before. You see one thing this time, you push it down. 2 days later, you see it again, you push it down. And I think there was a study out, there's been several, but one of them said that the normal person in their lifetime may see 6 or 7 traumatic incidents, where the average cop will probably see under 200. And I would like to say it's probably more, especially for cops that work in busier areas. They're probably pushing 1,000 traumatic incidents in a lifetime, and that's stuff that we're stuffing down. And so all that stress eventually builds up, and you're building up just the stress. You're building up cortisol. You're getting fat and lazy and not doing stuff, and eventually you're going to have some suicidal ideation. Now I mentioned. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, do you know, have the departments changed their training at all? Is there stuff included for stuff like this, or is this why you're speaking out about it? Because it's still an ongoing battle.
It's why we're speaking out about it, and yeah, okay. I'll get to that because it'll blow you away.
Oh gosh.
No, I talked about Lieutenant Colonel Dave Grossman. Dave Grossman was an Army veteran. Spent 20 years in the Army. Became a lieutenant colonel. He has a PhD in psychology. He is an expert in several things, and suicide. He's a suicidologist also, but he's been doing sleep studies and following sleep. And according to him, the lack of sleep is the number one cause of suicides among first responders. Suicide, or the lack of sleep, is the number one cause of excessive force and everything like that. And I could see that.
I could see that too.
When I was working, I could work an overtime shift and work 18 hours in a 24-hour period, get 6 hours off, and go back to work on my regular shift. So you're only getting like 3 or 4 hours of sleep. And Dave Grossman came up with this. And then there was a Rebecca Bernhard. She's a suicidologist out of Stanford University, and she did a study. And she found out that sleep-deprived persons are more likely to commit suicide, and that poor sleep was a significant predictor of suicide and depression. Now, last year on the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department, one deputy was murdered in the line of duty. He was stopped at a stop sign, and a car rolled up behind him, and the guy just reached over and shot him in the back of the head. He was assassinated, basically.
Oh my goodness.
And then another deputy shortly thereafter died by suicide. And both of those were due to a lack of sleep. Since 2020, since the George Floyd incident, obviously law enforcement's been having a hard time retaining people. And so people are being forced to work additional hours. They're being forced to work on their days off. When I was working, we weren't allowed to work more than 96 hours of overtime a month. Now, deputies on the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department are being forced to work over 120 to 130 a month. They're working 16 to 18 hours a day with no days off for 2 or 3 months at a time. So there's definitely, they're sleep deprived. On top of that, they're going to court and doing other things. And that all holds true with what Dave Grossman said. And the dangerous part of having a tired first responder, being tired in the first place, is science has shown that going 18 hours without sleep is the equivalent of having a 0.05 blood alcohol. So if you're up for 24 hours, it would be the equivalent of having a 0.10 blood alcohol. So you're basically, you're not drunk, but you have the same effect on your body.
Yeah, it makes sense. Your reaction time is going to be slower. You're not thinking as clearly. It makes sense when you think about it.
Yeah. You touched on this a little bit, the mental health concerns, which is one of the causal factors to suicide. And that goes back to training. When I first started, I told you in my academy class, we heard about, they called it stress then, probably about a half an hour. We just didn't get trained on it. There was, in my entire career, I probably heard 1 or 2 times about, if you feel stressed out, you go to Psychological Services Bureau. which is from the sheriff's department, and you'd go to them. And when I was in the academy, one of the psychologists came in and actually spoke, and you're having marital problems, come and see us. You're having different problems, come and see us. They never talked about if you're having problems with what you're seeing at work.
Mm-hmm.
No, that was never discussed in 30 years, 31 years. And that's why I'm saying it now is on the department I was with, I was involved in an on-duty shooting. I had to go to see the psychiatrist, and I went in to see the department psychiatrist, and I did what every other cop does. And he goes, "I'm okay, happy, good day, and see you later." I'll be there my 20 minutes, and I'm gone.
Yeah.
And that's
That's
it when you
yeah.
stuffed it down inside. And there, there's a guy named Chad Kempis. He wrote a book. And in it, he says, "I'm fine, I'm great, never been felt better. Couldn't be. I'm blessed. No, too stressed to be blessed." And in the meantime, he's just shoving all this stuff down. And I can exactly understand what he's talking about, and that's what I did. And I think one of the reasons we did that or we do that is one, if we're forced to go see a psych, you don't want to be told what to do, because that's the one thing cops hate, being told what to do. And so you go see the psych, and then you find out you're there for 10 minutes, and you find out that the psychiatrist is basically culturally incompetent. They don't know anything about law enforcement. They took this job because it's a good county job that hired them, where they can build up their own hours to get into the private sector, and that's, for the most part, that's what it is. And you wouldn't see these guys hanging around. They might spend a year or two or three on the department. Los Angeles County actually had one guy who faked being a psychiatrist for
Oh
3 years
goodness.
before he got caught. And
For 3 years
yeah,
before they caught him?
before about 3 years before I got caught.
Who was sleeping on the job?
And there were a couple of deputies that had died by suicide, who were being seen by this guy, and he was, just had no clue.
Oh my
Not only
goodness.
not trained, but it's just sad. And the same
That's
psychological
yeah.
bureau I'm talking about, the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department has 18,000 employees. Right now, they're right around 9,000 sworn deputy sheriffs. The New York Police Department's right around 30,000. I think Chicago is probably right around 15 or 16,000 sworn, maybe 12,000 sworn, right around. LAPD is at 9,000 sworn. So there's large departments. And the Psychological Services Bureau for Los Angeles County Sheriff came out a couple of years ago, and they says, we can expect 2 cops a year die by suicide on a department this size. And I'm thinking to myself, that's an insane statement to make. That means that means no training. It's crazy to say you can expect to lose 2 cops a year. So that means the size of Chicago could expect to lose 2 cops a year. Sadly, 2 years ago, they lost 4 in a week. You can expect with New York City, you can expect 6 a year. We should expect none.
I was just going to say the expectation should be 0.
Exactly. And by saying that, I'm just thinking it's insane. And I'm thinking, we have mandatory training every month on pursuits, mandatory training on force, mandatory training on shooting. We have to shoot to qualify often. We do force training. We do defensive tactics training. We do officer survival training. But the one officer survival training that during my entire career, and it's still not being done now, is suicide awareness. How to deal with post-traumatic stress, how to deal with suicidal ideation, how to deal with all that. And I just think it's crazy. Last year on November 6th, 4 members of the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department died by suicide. In December of the year before, I think it was 4 members of the Chicago Police Department died by suicide. And New York PD had several, and it's those numbers, they just shouldn't be happening like that. I think Chicago in that one year had 7. So,
Yeah, it's terrible.
Then you get the medical issues. One of the things that the cops, they don't want to do is being, you're going in, you see the psychologist and they're saying, you're unfit for duty. You can't be a cop anymore. You got to hang it up. and then you just kind of like you're out the door, you get a stress retirement, or some type of medical retirement, and that's it. There's no party, there's no goodbye. There you're just kind of like, give me your gun and badge and see you later, and that causes issues. One of the guys from the sheriff's department last year, that happened to him, and he was died by suicide. And if guys who are on medical injuries and see no end, a friend of mine, he fortunately retired, but a friend of mine, he was on off work for almost 4 years on different injuries and with several surgeries, and that just stayed on his mind, and it built on him and built on him and built on him. But he knew he was at the end of his career, and he knew that he was getting to a point where he could retire, and he did. But it just built on him, and I could see how people could make that an issue. One of the things that cops have, well, we all have guns. And when you're going through some hard times and having issues with stress and hypervigilant and family issues and alcohol issues and stuff like that, and you're getting ready to get fired, we have guns. 86% of all law enforcement suicides are by firearm. And the psychologists, they want to take your guns, and your bosses want to take your guns from you, and that's just not going to happen, because that's a fight. So I talk about losing your jobs, people under discipline, internal affairs investigations, stuff like that. Those are definitely causal factors, because a lot of guys take their identity as being a cop. When you get out of I got out a gun and I got a badge, and I'm going to go out and take bad guys to jail and drive fast. And that's what I am. And that's their identity for 30 years. And you're 25 years into your career, and all of a sudden you pick up an internal affairs investigation where it looks like you might get terminated. They just say, I'm done. I'm not going to put up with this, and take hands in their own self. Pending and nearing retirement. This is what's weird for me is, retirement is, they always make it sound all dandy and everything like that. In the movie The Onion Field, in the movie The New Centurions by Joseph Wambaugh, George Scott is playing an older officer who is getting ready to retire, and he's working the streets, and he had trained Stacy Keach and a couple other guys that had just coming out of the academy. And in the movie, George C. Scott retires, and he goes, I'm going to retire. And he was divorced. I'm going to retire, and I'm going to move back to Florida and live with my daughter. She's going to take care of me for the rest of my life. And he didn't work out or something. He moved back, and he moved into the same district where his old patrol station was. And he went to his patrol station, and it was several months later, and it was like, nobody wanted to talk to him. They didn't have time for him. They were doing off other things. And that's what it is when you retire. It's like a friendly divorce. Here's your badge, here's your gun, happy times. We're going to throw you a little party. Here's a retirement gift, and go out and do your thing. And if you go back, it's like, you go back and you see, well, that's where my desk was, and someone else is sitting there, and you see things, and it's depressing. And in the movie The New Centurions, George C. Scott ended up beating his gun, committing suicide. And that's just a reality of retirement. Probably, I want to say 90 some odd percent of people who retired don't die by suicide, but there are the small number done. Now, in 2019, in the city of New York, a deputy chief who was 2 weeks before retirement died by suicide. He had 30 some odd years on the department. He was a deputy chief. He couldn't see himself out of law enforcement. He let his identity eat him up, and he killed himself. In the same month, in 2019, a retired detective sergeant from the Long Beach Police Department in Long Beach, California, went back to his old station and committed suicide on the front porch, or the front walkway of his station. He had just missed his job. That was his identity, and he let them eat it up. And he had been retired for 2 years when he did this, and this is just crazy. One of the things that some agencies do is they have um, activities for retirees. I belong to, within Los Angeles County, there's a group of an organization called the Retired Employees of Los Angeles County. And so that includes all retired LA County retirees. And they send out newsletters, and you can get involved in different groups if you want with them. But there's another group, it's called Los Angeles Sheriff's, or LASD, or Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Retired. And so every year I go to a reunion of other retirees. And usually there's about 1,000 of us. We get together in Laughlin, Nevada for a couple of days and just tell war stories and kind of get back into it. But that's how we stay involved enough in law enforcement to say, no, we don't want to be involved in law enforcement. And how you get past that retirement issue of being a bad divorce and everything. And every year as I go on, the stories, they get better because you make up more stuff because you forget more stuff.
Yeah.
And you're also, as the years go on, guys that retiring after you, they're showing up at these events now. Yeah, dude, I haven't seen you in 3 years. How things going? And then you kind of rebuild relationships that you used to have. So those things are kind of fun. And then, probably it's one of the saddest things is life-altering events. Like I said at the beginning, my dad died of undiagnosed cancer. From the time he got sick to the time he died was less than 2 weeks.
Oh my
My wife,
goodness.
yeah, it was like a blink of an eye. My wife, 4 months later, was diagnosed with cancer, with stage 3 lung cancer, which metastasized into stage 4 lung cancer when it went to her brain. And like I said, she's still alive. She's in the other room right now, and she's just a walking, talking miracle of God. And those are some life-changing events. There were some very, very dark days for both of us during the first year of the last 5 years. But also, you're losing a child, you're losing your spouse, or a parent passes away. Just what I says, those are life-altering events, and those play on people's heads. Something that's kind of weird is you become an empty nester. All of a sudden, the last kid turns 18 and goes off into the college or the military or goes off on their own. And all of a sudden, you're in this big 3-4 bedroom house with nobody around and no noise, and you gotta figure out what to do there, and that plays on people's heads. So it's all about getting past those issues too. I talked about the lack of suicide training, and it's a training. It's a mental health issue, and it's not only suicide ideation. It's not only a mental health issue among first responders and law enforcement. It's a mental health issue among the general population. Every year, just under 700,000 people died by suicide. It was roughly worldwide. That was roughly one suicide every 11 seconds. 16 seconds. In the United States, last year, suicide was the number 11 cause of death, where homicide ranked in at number 16. So, there's more suicides than there are homicides. And those are just issues. And the mental health world isn't getting in or isn't addressing it yet. And it's something that needs to be done. There are some organizations out there that are doing mental health training and for our military, active duty and veterans, and for first responders, and they're doing real well. But for the most part, the VA hasn't caught up with the military and law enforcement. I just say, a friend of mine is a retired chief from the same department I came from, and I just says, and he was management. I go, all management does is they kick the can down the street every year. Mm-hmm. They don't have the time. They don't have the money. The county's not going to give us the money, or the city's not going to give us the money to to have this training, so we got to cut training someplace else, and that's what they're doing. They're cutting training in general, but then they're never starting any training on mental health. And the unions, they're not really doing a lot. There's two major unions from the department that I came from, and one union addressed it for a second, and the other union, I talked to them last year when I was at this reunion I went to, and they're not. They weren't interested in what I was trying to pitch to them about some type of interventions and talking to them. And that's what's sad. Last year, the department I came from, they did the Suicide Awareness Day, and it was more like a carnival. They had people, the face paintings and camel riding and different stuff, and it's going, well, where are you talking about suicide awareness? So there needs to be some type of the training on it. And one of the things that in the last couple of years, not so much when I was working, although it was a factor, is just betrayal. Since 2020, there has been no backbone among management, and they haven't been backing up their cops. So the cops are feeling betrayed. They're not actively going out and working as hard as they're doing. They're getting, they're working 80 hours a day, it seems like. And so they're betrayed, they're depressed, they're down, and they're just going to a really, really dark place.
Yeah, unfortunately.
So one of the things I did is I mentioned before, I wrote a book called Broken, and it is available on Amazon. And I'm going to hold this up so you can see it in the camera there. It's all pretty.
But it is pretty.
And I'll send you a link to it so you can put it in the post notes.
Yes, I will absolutely put it in the show notes.
But there are a couple of organizations, and first of all, there's two organizations that offer immediate counseling for cops and their families who are dealing with post-traumatic stress issues and suicide ideation. One of them is called Copline, COPLINE, and their phone number is 1-800-267-5463, and they can be found at copline.org. And the other organization is Cop to Cop. It's they're based out of New Jersey, and their phone number is 866-267-2267, and they can be found at njcop2cop.com. And these guys, they're specially trained. I know Copline is specially trained retired cops, so you're going to get someone who's culturally competent when you call them. They're also, both of them organizations, they're people, they call takers. They go through a minimum of 4 hours or 40 hours of training, 1 week of training, and they have constant training throughout the year to help when they're counseling people or when they're talking to people. And they're constantly looking for new people, and more people are getting hired or going with them every year. And they also do background investigations on the cops that they're going to be their call takers, because they do want competent people doing it. They just don't want some retired cop that retired under a cloak of bad news or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then there's two organizations. One of them, I'm friends with one of the founders of it. It's the Mighty Oaks Warrior Programs, and they offer training, and it's a faith-based training for veterans and active duty and retired and active first responders. And they do a week-long thing. And I was just looking at their website today, and over the last several years, they've helped 2,500 people, and everything for them is at no cost. They'll send you to their training for a week. Often they have one up in Paso Robles, one in Ohio, and then a couple on the East Coast, one in Texas, I believe. And it's funny because one of the Marines one of the persons that started that organization was a Marine out of Camp Pendleton.
Oh, there you go.
And him and another Marine, they started Mighty Oaks after their deployments, and they were having major issues with post-traumatic stress. And
Yeah.
then another group is called a Reboot Recovery. They are based out of the East Coast, and they do weekly trainings for veterans and first responders, and they'll have a group set up for one day a week for a couple hours. They'll meet, and that's how they do their things. And they do, I think, 13 meetings or 14 meetings, and then you graduate from the program. So those are two real good programs that are helpful for veterans and first responders.
Amazing. And we'll include all that info in the show notes for easy access.
Yeah, I
And
will.
just
I'll send them to you.
and just for a little more personal touch, what advice would you give to somebody who's struggling with either PTSD or suicidal ideation?
I have a line that I say: if you need help, get help. Help is available. I just gave you 2 phone numbers to where people are helping, but on a one-to-one basis, if you're an active duty law enforcement officer or a retired law enforcement officer, watch your partner. When you work with someone every day for 8 hours a day in the same radio car, going out and doing what you do, watch your partner. They're going to show signs, little things you may not see or think about, but they're going to show signs that something is wrong. And just, it's okay if you're going to ask them. It's okay to say, "Are you going to hurt yourself? Are you thinking about suicide?" It's okay to ask that. But you got to start the conversation, and it's on a one-to-one basis. Research has found that peer counseling, just sitting down and talking to your partners or having a peer counselor talk to your partners, is far more effective at the beginning than going to a psychologist. And like I said, I was involved in a non-duty shooting where the suspect died. I went to a psychologist. It was more beneficial to me talking to my peers about what happened and my experiences from that than it was talking to a psychologist who had no clue of what I was talking about. And so seeing on a personal level like that is helpful. But talk to someone, get out and talk. That's the main thing. If you're feeling bad, talk to your partner. If you see your partner's not doing well, talk to them. One of the major things, cops like to have fun. We like to enjoy our days off and go out and go water skiing, go to the lake, the river, the ocean, do different things with other cops. We hang out with cops. So we're always around them. It is those times when your partner says, "Well, you know what? I don't want to do anything anymore." When they just kind of withdraw from all the activities you did on duty and off duty, that's a noticeable sign of something's going wrong. And another noticeable sign that is just the anger issue. As you're starting to get fed up, as you're getting tensed up, you're not going to be as nice as you normally would be. And so if you can get past the anger issue, or if you see someone with an anger issue, talk to them, set them down and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And it's okay if you do it over a beer, not 5 beers, just a beer, maybe 2. But, sit down and talk to them.
I think that's
So,
great advice in general. I think we have lost how we talk to each other and how we connect with one another sometimes. So I think that's good advice for people in general is to talk to
yeah,
each other, care about each other.
start the conversation. Unfortunately, we live in a social media world now instead of a face-to-face world. I mean, social media is great. We're using
Mhm.
it right now for a purpose, but it's you have to have that one-on-one conversation, and you cannot have a one-on-one conversation uh, with sending text back and forth.
Yeah,
It's
it's not the same.
yeah. So you get the conversation if you can get right next to your partner and put your arm around and say, "Hey, dude, what's going on?" You know, they're going to open up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
so
so.
that's the best part of it. But
Yeah,
yeah, start the conversation.
wonderful. There you go. Talk to each other, guys. Any final advice for my listeners before we say good night for the evening?
Pretty sure I covered just about everything. Again, just if you're having issues, Cop Line and Cop to Cop, those are organizations. A law enforcement officer, retired law enforcement officer, and their families. So if you're the spouse of a cop and you see that your spouse is having issues, or call cop to cop, call cop line and talk to them. And they can, most of the time, if not all the time, they could probably send you in the right direction of where to go. And I believe Copline is now has the ability to get you in contact with um, culturally competent psychologists. They may be out of the insurance thing, and that's another reason why cops don't go get help, is because a lot of times they don't want to go to the department psychologist or who the department says to them, because they think the psychologist is going to rat them out, is going to say, hey, this guy has
Yeah.
problems, and that's going to cause problems with your supervisors. And cops they don't want to be seen as weak and needing help, because they're going to be that call, and their cop friends, their partners, are going to say, well, we don't want him here because he's weak, he has issues. And so they don't want to be ratted out like that. And the other reason is because a lot of times our insurance won't pick up private help, so they don't see them for that. That's why I like the peer counseling thing. But there's one organization I forgot to mention, and that is Blue Help. They also go by First Help now, and I'd mentioned Blue Help earlier. They track law enforcement suicides. They also have different programs that can educate people and send people in the right direction. So go to their website, is bluehelp.org or firsthelpnow.org, and where First Help covers firefighters, dispatchers, medics, and cops. So and correctional officers.
I mean,
But
at least we can be thankful for all these resources. So that's something. So
yes, the resources is there, and as the more we talk about it, I think the numbers, we're going to see less and less suicides every year. And if we can get the message out, not only to cops and firefighters, but just to the general public, because I don't know if you know this, but among teenagers from, I think, 13 to 27 was the demographic, suicide was like the number 3 cause of death last year.
oh my
That's
goodness,
sad.
it
But
is very sad.
it's an issue that needs to be addressed, and law enforcement has to quit kicking the can down the street and address it,
Yes.
and we can get it fixed.
And that's why we're here. That's why we get on podcasts and we talk about it, because the squeaky wheel gets the oil, as my
Yeah,
mom always says.
yeah, you're right, Rita. I like that one.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much for being here, Danny. I appreciate it.
And I want to thank you very much for having me. I enjoy talking about this. I hope I can reach some people and from saving their lives and educating them on what's going on. And I really enjoyed having you as a host.
Thank you. Yeah, and here's hoping that we help at least one, at the very least. And this is how to deal when the shit gets real, guys. I will see you all next episode.